Hey everyone, welcome back. We're going to be tackling something today that I think we've all wrestled with
Yeah.
at some point, and that is handling criticism.
Yeah.
And I know you're no stranger to leadership,
Right.
so this deep dive is going to be particularly relevant for you, I think.
Absolutely.
We are going to be exploring an article from pastors.com
Okay.
called Handling Criticism Without Losing Your Cool.
I like that title.
It's packed with practical strategies.
Okay.
And one thing that really caught my eye was this idea
Uh-huh.
that criticism often tells us more about the critic
Oh,
than the person being criticized.
interesting. Yeah.
It kind of flips the script a little bit, doesn't
It
it?
really does. And the article doesn't sugarcoat things either.
Right.
It dives right into the fact that criticism is pretty much unavoidable
Yeah.
when you're trying to make a real difference.
Yeah, I think that's true.
In fact, you might even argue that if you're not getting any criticism,
Yeah.
you're probably not pushing hard enough
Ah.
to make an impact.
Yeah, there's a quote in here that really hit me.
Okay.
Do you want to know how to avoid criticism? Do nothing, say nothing,
Yeah.
and be nothing. It's a bit a tough pill to swallow, but it really makes you think.
It is. It's a call to action, though I see it as a call to action.
Right.
It reminds us that real leadership requires courage,
Yeah.
and that courage sometimes means facing criticism head-on.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about shrinking back to avoid ruffling feathers.
Yeah.
It's about stepping up and making a difference,
Yeah.
even if it means facing some pushback along the way.
All right, so let's dig into this intriguing idea that criticism is often more revealing
Yeah.
of the critic than the person being criticized.
I like it.
The article mentions that critics often project their own pain,
Right.
insecurities, and even their unmet needs.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, think about a time when you've received criticism that really stung.
Okay.
Was there something about the delivery or the content that felt personal?
Yeah.
Maybe it triggered a particular insecurity
Yeah.
or brought up past hurts.
Uh-huh.
This isn't to excuse bad behavior,
Right.
but to recognize that we all have our own baggage.
Right.
And sometimes that baggage spills over into our interactions with others.
That's a great point. It's like
Yeah.
we all have these sensitive spots.
Yeah.
And when someone hits one of those spots,
Right.
it can trigger a disproportionate reaction. And maybe, just maybe,
Yeah.
the critic is acting out of their own woundedness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The article uses a powerful analogy.
Okay.
Imagine a critic with a void in their heart, a deep longing for love and acceptance.
Okay.
If those needs aren't met,
Right.
they might try to fill that void with attention, even if it comes in the form of negative attention through criticism.
So let's say we're trying to be more understanding to see the critic's perspective.
Okay.
How does that actually change how we respond to criticism?
Right.
Because let's be honest, when someone's coming at us with criticism, our first instinct
Sure.
isn't always to be compassionate.
It's definitely not easy,
Right.
but the article points to a powerful example.
Okay.
How did Jesus treat his harshest critics?
Right.
The religious leaders who constantly challenged and questioned him. He didn't retaliate.
Right.
He didn't exclude them.
Yeah.
Even in the face of hostility, he continued to engage with them and demonstrate love.
That's a powerful reminder. So how can we practically apply that kind of grace in our own lives?
Yeah.
The article lays out a 3-step formula for handling criticisms I found really helpful.
Okay, I'm eager to hear your take on those steps.
Okay.
What resonated with you?
Well, the first step really resonated with me. If it's true, listen and learn from it.
Yeah.
You know, admitting there's room for improvement.
Right.
Sometimes, even if it's hard to hear, our critics can actually help us
Yeah.
see those blind spots we might miss on our own.
That's a great point. It takes humility to acknowledge that we don't have all the answers,
Right.
and that even our critics might have something valuable to teach us. Yeah. And sometimes those tough critiques can be the catalyst for real growth.
Absolutely. And the second step is, if it's untrue, ignore it.
Right.
Recognizing that the criticism might be more about the critic's issues
Yeah.
than anything you've done.
That's right.
It's about not letting untrue criticism
Yeah.
take up space in your mind and steal your joy.
It's so easy to get caught up in trying to defend ourselves against every accusation.
Right.
But sometimes the best response is simply to let it go,
Yeah.
not dwelling on it, not letting it define you.
Right.
It's about recognizing that you can't control what other people say,
Yeah.
but you can control how you react.
That's so true. Okay, and the third step.
Yeah.
This one's interesting.
Go ahead.
Judge yourself by God's standards, not everyone else's.
Okay.
The article talks about how trying to please everyone leads to that fear of man trap,
Right.
which can be paralyzing.
And think about it. You can't please everyone.
Right.
There will always be someone who has something negative to say, no matter what you do. Yeah, that's true.
So the question becomes, whose approval are you seeking?
Mm-hmm.
Whose voice are you listening to?
That's a powerful question.
Yeah.
So if we're living for an audience of one, as the article puts it,
Yeah.
how does that translate to persevering in the face of criticism,
Right.
especially when it feels relentless?
Mm-hmm.
Because let's face it, leading and doing meaningful work, it's not always easy.
It definitely isn't.
It's not all sunshine and roses.
And I think this is where resilience comes in.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that leadership and ministry are marathons, not sprints.
Right.
We're going to face challenges.
Yep.
We're going to encounter opposition.
Yeah.
And we're going to get knocked down from time to time.
So how do we develop that kind of resilience? How do we keep going when the criticism feels overwhelming?
I think it starts with recognizing that our worth isn't tied to external validation.
Okay.
It's rooted in something much deeper. The article draws on the idea of judging ourselves by God's standards.
Mm-hmm. But I think that concept can resonate, even if you're not coming from a faith-based perspective.
Okay, I'm curious to hear how you would unpack that for someone who might not resonate with the religious language.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
It's about identifying your core values, your guiding principles,
Okay.
and letting those be the compass that guides your decisions and actions. It's about aligning yourself with a purpose that's bigger than yourself.
Right.
Whether that's serving your community, advocating for a cause you believe in,
Okay.
or simply striving to be the best version of yourself.
I love that. So instead of getting caught up in the opinions of others,
Yeah.
we're grounding ourselves in something deeper, something that gives us a sense of direction and purpose,
Right.
even amidst the storms of criticism.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when we're anchored in that kind of purpose, criticism loses its power to derail us.
Okay.
It becomes less about personal attacks
Right.
and more about navigating different perspectives, learning from feedback, and staying true to our mission.
Okay, so we've talked about grounding ourselves in a sense of purpose that's bigger than ourselves.
Right.
But what about the emotional and spiritual side of handling criticism?
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, criticism can really sting,
It can.
even when we know it's not true or it's coming from a place of hurt.
You're right. It can be incredibly challenging. It can trigger feelings of discouragement,
Right.
doubt, even anger.
Yeah.
And I think that's where self-care comes in. It's about recognizing that we need to tend to our own emotional and spiritual well-being,
Okay.
especially when we're facing external pressures.
So what are some practical strategies for self-care in the midst of criticism?
One thing that I find incredibly helpful is mindfulness.
Okay.
It's about paying attention to our thoughts and feelings without judgment,
Right.
noticing those negative thought patterns that tend to spiral when we're feeling criticized.
You mean those thoughts like, I'm not good enough or I'm a failure?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And once we become aware of those thoughts, we can start to challenge them.
Yeah.
Ask ourselves, is this thought true? Is it helpful?
Yeah.
Is it based on facts, or is it just a distorted perception?
Uh-huh.
We can start to reframe those negative thoughts into something more constructive and compassionate.
So it's about recognizing that our thoughts aren't always accurate reflections of reality,
Right.
and that we have the power to choose which thoughts we want to focus on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes self-care means setting boundaries with people who are consistently critical or negative, even if those people are close to us.
That can be really tough, especially if it's someone we care about.
It is.
But sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves and for others
Yeah.
is to create a safe space where healthy communication and growth can flourish.
And where toxic negativity is not allowed to take root.
I love that.
Okay.
Okay, so we've talked about mindfulness and setting boundaries.
Right.
What other self-care practices can help us build resilience in the face of criticism?
Well, I think it's also important to surround ourselves with a supportive community.
Okay.
People who will speak truth into our lives. People who will encourage us and lift us up when we're feeling down.
You know, I've found that sometimes the best antidote to criticism is simply to connect with people who appreciate and value you for who you are.
That's so true.
It's a reminder that you're not alone, that you're loved and supported even when things get tough.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And sometimes that support might come from a mentor,
Yeah.
a therapist, or a spiritual director.
Okay.
Someone who can help us process our emotions, challenge our negative thought patterns,
Right.
and point us back to our core values and our sense of purpose.
That's so important. Having that safe space to be vulnerable,
Yeah.
to admit when we're struggling, and to receive the guidance and support we need to keep going.
And, sometimes self-care is as simple as doing things that bring you joy,
Okay.
things that fill you up and remind you of the beauty and goodness in the world.
Yeah.
It might be spending time in nature,
Right.
listening to music,
Right.
reading a good book, or simply taking a few moments to appreciate the simple things in life.
I love that. It's about being intentional about filling our wells with positivity.
Yeah,
So we have the reserves we need to weather the inevitable storms of criticism.
it's good.
Because, let's face it, criticism is a part of life.
It is.
It's part of the human experience.
Right.
And I think the more we can equip ourselves with the tools and perspectives to handle it gracefully, the better off we'll be.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into handling criticism. We've talked about understanding the critic,
Right.
prioritizing self-care,
Yeah.
and even reframing criticism as a potential catalyst for growth. But before we wrap up, there's one more layer I think is crucial
Yeah.
to navigating criticism effectively.
You're talking about discernment.
Yes,
Right. The ability to distinguish between constructive criticism,
right.
the kind that can actually help us improve, and just plain negativity that's better left ignored.
Because not all criticism is created equal. Some of it,
Right.
even if it's delivered in a less than ideal way,
Yeah.
might contain valuable insights.
It could help us see blind spots, identify areas where we can grow,
Right.
and ultimately become more effective leaders. But how do we sift through the noise to find those nuggets of truth?
That's where paying attention to the intent behind the criticism
Okay.
becomes key.
Oh.
Is this person genuinely trying to help me improve? Or are they coming from a place of judgment
Right.
or even a hidden agenda?
Because let's be honest, sometimes what's presented as constructive criticism
Right.
is really just someone projecting their own insecurities or trying to manipulate a situation.
Absolutely. So how can you tell the difference?
Right.
One clue is the tone and delivery.
Okay.
Is the person approaching you with respect and a genuine desire to help?
Yeah.
Or are they coming from a place of anger, resentment, or a need to be right?
And I think it's also important to pay attention to the content of the criticism.
Yeah.
Is it focused on specific behaviors or actions that you can actually change?
Uh-huh.
Or is it more about attacking your character or who you are as a person?
That's a great point. Constructive criticism is about the what, not the who.
Okay.
It offers specific suggestions for improvement, not sweeping generalizations or personal insults.
So it's about learning to filter out the noise
Right.
and focus on the feedback that can actually help you grow and become a better leader.
Exactly. And sometimes discernment means having the courage to set boundaries
Right.
with people who are consistently critical or negative,
Yeah.
even if they are people you care about.
That can be a tough call.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's necessary for your own well-being
Right.
and for the health of the relationship.
You're right. It's about creating a space where healthy communication and growth can flourish.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a few key takeaways
Yeah.
to remember as they navigate criticism in their own lives.
Great.
First, remember that criticism is inevitable, especially when you're stepping out and trying to make a difference in the world.
Right.
It's not a sign of failure. It's often an indication that you're on the right track, challenging the status quo and pushing for positive change.
Second, recognize that criticism often says more about the critic than it does about you.
Right?
Many critics are projecting their own pain, insecurities, and unmet needs.
Third, choose your response wisely. If the criticism is true and delivered with good intent, listen and learn from it. If it's untrue or simply mean-spirited, ignore it.
Right.
And always remember to measure your success against your own values and goals,
Yeah.
not the ever-shifting opinions of others.
Fourth, make self-care a priority.
Yeah.
Criticism can take an emotional toll.
Right.
So be intentional about filling your cup with things that bring you joy,
Yeah.
connecting with supportive people, and practicing mindfulness to challenge those negative thought patterns that can creep in.
And finally, practice discernment. Learn to distinguish between constructive criticism that can help you grow and toxic negativity that needs to be filtered out.
Right.
Remember, you have the power to choose which voices you listen to
Yeah.
and which feedback you allow to influence your actions.
This has been such an insightful conversation. I hope it's equipped you
I agree.
with some practical strategies and new perspectives on handling criticism with grace and confidence.
And remember, even amidst the challenges, you're not alone. Surround yourself with supportive people.
Yeah.
Stay true to your values and keep striving to make a positive impact on the world. And on that note, we'll leave you with a final thought to ponder. What if you viewed criticism not as something to be feared or avoided, but as an opportunity for growth refinement?
Interesting.
and even greater resilience. Until next time, keep diving deep.